Let's get started. So today our guest is Ilya Kramer, and he's going to talk about his project webrecorder.io and a client-side web archive player that you can run in your browser that uses JavaScript. So I will pass it over to Ilya.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jim. Jim kind of asked me to present the last moment Friday, so I don't have a whole lot of slides, but I'll just do a live demo of some of the stuff that I've been working on. And so I'll probably just share my screen. And actually, if you'd like, you could also follow along. And so the first thing I'll be showing is Web Recorder. So I'll just share a link, webrecorder.io. And the idea with Web Recorder is that basically a tool for anyone to use to archive browser traffic as you're using it. So that the basic idea is that anything that you enter into the browser is captured, and then you could replay it. So for example, do something interesting. For example, I work for a nonprofit called Rhizome, and could archive Rhizome's Instagram feed. And so I enter the URL, and hopefully if my network is decent enough right now, I'll be able to. So it's loading this Instagram page. There's a size counter here, and that is being recorded. And so the way that this works is that it's basically a proxy. So it's going through a hosted service that's capturing network traffic and then serving it back. And as it's doing that, it's writing it to WARC files. And essentially what it's doing is it's recording exactly what I view here. So as I kind of browse around, you can see the size counter here going up, and I can stop at any time. And so this is kind of a user-driven archiving tool. However, at this point, this is using a hosted service, so it's somewhat centralized right now, but it's all open source, and so anyone can run it on their own. So like I can, for example, I think there's a video here, so I'll click on this and play this video, and then so I'll stop this now, and then I'm using it anonymously, and then I can also click on this, and now I'm in the replay mode, and so now it's playing back what I've recorded now. So I'm in here, it says browsing, and what it has captured here is essentially what I've browsed so far. So for example, I should be able to click on this video and play it back again, but I won't be able to browse things that I haven't yet browsed. So at some point it will stop. So for example, I haven't scrolled all the way down. And so this is also still using the webrecorder.io service. And this is like a project I've been working on for a while. And it's part of a nonprofit called Rhizome, and we're grant funded. What I also wanted to show today is sort of a really new idea that is now possible. I think is really cool, and I shared it with Jim. And that is, so essentially the way that this works is kind of like a Wayback Machine. It's playing back URLs that are served from this server. But it's also possible to actually present web archives entirely in the browser. And so to do that, I'll go ahead and download this, what I've recorded now. It creates a file format called WARC, which is a standard web archiving format. And so, so it's downloaded that, and then have another project. This is kind of the new thing called wabac.js, sort of the WABAC, which is sort of the original spelling of Wayback Machine. And with this, and you can also follow along if you like. It's basically just this URL, wab.ac. I can actually open this WARC file directly in the browser. And so I'll go ahead and do that now with the file I just downloaded. And so it shows Instagram. And so this is using service workers to play back a web archive directly. And so this doesn't require any server resources at all. And so it's, in this case, it's replaying this Instagram page entirely in the browser. There's no, I created the file in webrecord.io, and I think I should even be able to play this video that's been captured here. And this is basically just a static. If I shift refresh without service workers, you'll see that it's just running on GitHub pages. So if I do a normal refresh, it will play back in the browser. And so right now, this isn't yet integrated with ipfs in any way, but I think that this provides a potential to serve high fidelity web archive content from ipfs by doing the web archive replay entirely client side. Yeah, essentially the idea is that any WARC file created with Web Recorder, or for example, downloaded from Internet Archive, could be played back directly in the browser. Some other cool things that it can do, and this is kind of a sort of a neat hack in some ways, but also kind of shows what it can do, is that it can, so Internet Archive, for example, it's actually possible, since it's just a static page, it's possible to archive this page itself into the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. And doing that, it's possible to provide an alternative replay mechanism to what Internet Archive provides. So for example, this is this site archived in the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, and it's actually kind of running as a service worker inside of there. And with that, I can actually play back. So for example, I can play back a version of CNN.com from Internet Archive's Wayback Machine using this system inside of their Wayback Machine. So this is kind of a Wayback Machine inside of a Wayback Machine, if you will, which I think the reason that you would want to do that is to provide improved replay fidelity. So for example, this is a CNN.com page using wabac.js inside of the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. If I just play back the same site from within their regular Wayback Machine, it actually doesn't render as well. So this is a way to essentially provide an improved replay mechanism. And so what it does is it basically reads the original data from Internet Archive and then does the replay on the client. Other things that this can do is, for example, you could record the data that's being viewed and create a new WARC file out of it, and extract that and kind of serve that to users. So there's, I think, probably a lot of different applications. And also the system supports HAR files, which are sort of built into the browser. So I want to really quickly show another. So before I use webrecord.io, but actually you don't even have to use webrecord.io to create the web archive. You can actually also use HAR files, although they're not as, so for example, I can, just using devtools, I can kind of do the same thing. I could visit, for example, I'll just use the same. And then I can, so now with devtools open, the browser has the ability to track the network log. And let's say I click on the same image and I play this, and then what I can do is, and this is problem with this is that it's not very user friendly. I can right click and can do save all as HAR content, and I can save this HAR file, and then I should be able to go back to C, and I should also be able to open this HAR file as well. HAR format is a JSON based format, so it's kind of it's not very ideal for let's see if I so it's not ideal for archiving large amounts of data, and it's kind of and again it's kind of dependent on the browser to serve to save everything in the HAR, but you could actually do it that way as well. So you can do it entirely. Oh, maybe the HAR didn't quite well. Okay, so maybe for this the HAR doesn't always work with the HAR format. Unfortunately, it would be nice if browsers provided a way to save dynamic sites directly, but we don't have that, and that's why we've built Web Recorder for that. But at least for the replay side, we can. So I'll just go back and open this again. And another example is that I've got is let's see here. Is a page from Twitter, and so for example, I open this other work file, and here I should be able to view this Twitter replay, also entirely rendered in the browser, and yeah, so this is basically rendering that here with. Let's see, and one final example is with the current setup, it's actually possible to, for example, link to a WARC file that's stored somewhere and have wabac.js open it directly. And so, for example, I'll share this link in the chat here, and then for example, let's see here. I'll just stop sharing my screen for now. And yeah, so for example, this link here, actually, if you load that, it will load this WARC file locally for you and then render that, redirect to that URL. And this should work in most browsers. And then you'll have a replay of that Twitter page rendered locally. And so the idea is that right now it's just loading from the web, but of course it could also load from IPFS and from any other data source. Just a quick, well, I did create a quick slide. I forgot about that. So kind of to summarize, basically, yeah, this is a serverless web archive replay designed to work with WARC and HAR files, or really it could be extended to anything. There's no integration with IPFS yet, and I haven't done anything with how to store WARC files in IPFS, but my colleague Savud has done some work with that with the IPWB system, and so probably that format could be used to store WARC data and kind of expand on that. Yeah, that's kind of the basic idea with this. I think it's pretty exciting because it can basically you can treat web archives the same way as other kinds of documents like PDFs and put them in a container such as WARC or perhaps the new web package format and present them to a user to be rendered directly in the browser. So I think, yeah, probably answer questions for the rest of the time.
Okay, great. Yeah. Put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Molly, did you have a hand?
Yeah, I was going to try and write my question down, but easier if I just kind of muddle through it.
Sure.
So I'm curious, you mentioned this is kind of centralized today. So who is backing up all of this content? Who is kind of funding the central infrastructure to keep all of these archive files around? Is it really just people downloading it on their own machines, or is there kind of a coordinated effort going on here?
So with wabrecord.io, which I kind of skimmed through in the beginning, but that's the main thing I work on. Is it's grant funded. So we have a grant from the Mellon Foundation, and that is run on Amazon right now. And of course, that's not necessarily the best way to go. So I'm kind of exploring ways that we can not be relying on Amazon for the wabrecord.io service. But at the moment, that's where it's running, and we received a 2-year grant from the Mellon Foundation and to run WebRecorder. But the new thing that I showed with the browser-based replay, that essentially allows for data to be stored anywhere and rendered entirely in the browser. Any more questions? Or I know I kind of skimmed through a bunch of stuff really quickly.
I just asked from the chat. First, thanks for coming and speaking. This was a very
Sure.
project. I see on the site you support, I like the focus on being logged in. So that's always been a challenge for archivists. Have you had any challenges and problems around public versus private content, or people accidentally archiving and exposing private content? Is there a takedown process? Or
there is, and we haven't really had specific takedown requests. I think most users choose to. So, unlike, for example, Internet Archive, that their goal is to have a kind of a public archive of the web. With WebRecorder, it's sort of aimed at users making their own personal archives or of content that is important to them, and so the data is private by default. WebRecorder does allow users to log into whatever sites that they want to archive, and that's sort of part of one of the features is that you can log into sites, but of course there is kind of a so for example the raw WARC data is not made public, but except to the owner of the site, so or sorry, the owner of the account, and so it's essentially whatever the users choose to make public. But they can archive their private data, and so that is definitely something I thought about. What happens if someone archives a private social media feed and then chooses to make it public? We haven't luckily had that happen, but that is definitely something that I thought about, and to have a process for that if that does happen.
So yeah, I'm really excited about the potential here for sort of like peer-to-peer archiving. So circles of friends capturing the websites they want. And this is just really useful for I tried out the system just before I hopped on the plane flying back from Barcelona, and I archived a few sites. I was able to look at them on the plane using the system.
Because of course how browsers work, to actually do the archiving is not really possible entirely with service workers. It would be great if it was, but you really need an extension probably, or wabrecord.io essentially to do that. To do it entirely client side would require an extension. But luckily with the replay, I think that the service worker approach kind of changes the access part. So even if the user that creates the archive must install an extension, anyone can view it thanks to the service worker approach, because that's now supported in all major browsers, I think.
So if I may come in.
Mm-hmm.
So WARCreate, Matt Kelly's tool, is there even when you are when you don't have access to something like web recorder. It's not as robust as web recorder, obviously, but it does what HAR files do, but except it stores things in WARC format. You'll have to install browser extension, obviously. Um, I think what Jim was suggesting is where like a group of friends archiving stuff and then collaborating and sharing. Um, the missing piece here is discovery. So yes, I can archive a bunch of sites on my machine. You can archive yours, and there should be a means to somehow communicate those WARC files, or at least the indexes that are created out of those. And then people should be able to, access captures of each other. Um, and I think there is a golden opportunity to integrate IPFS in this spot, basically to leverage the discovery possibility somehow. Then basically archive locally, index it, and then share those hashes as part of the index, the way we do in IPFS, sorry, IP Wayback, for example. And if that information is supplied back to browsers of peers, then using service workers, we can just fetch those pieces, compose them on the client side, and serve them as pages, basically.
Yep. Yeah. With this, right. The idea is that this component focuses entirely on the replay. So yeah, I think it would be ideal to integrate with other systems and a separate discovery layer that could point to, for example, an IPFS hash that could then, for example, you could essentially represent a particular archive page as IPFS hash /timestamp /URL,
right,
and have that be entered into the form to be looked up. So yeah, for example, I think probably integration with the JavaScript IPFS implementation would make a lot of sense.
Yes.
For this.
So last week I was in DC for web packaging workshop, and I presented the web archiving position paper there. And we see some great potential if and when web packaging makes it to mainstream browsers, basically. That will solve some of the problems that we are talking here. It kind of allows you to deliver the whole site, or a set of the pages with all the resources as a package, and then those pages can render um, in the context of the original domain. So without the need of the having another domain serving. So it's like what you do in your replay system, like the old web.today, where internal browser sees the web, past web, as if it is interacting with those domains directly, right? Because you have a proxy layer. So it kind of eliminates the need of that proxy, which is cool, but there are some situations where there are issues in the current spec. So I was talking to folks who work on that specification from Google. And we sorted a few things out, and hopefully there will be some changes accordingly.
Yeah, the other part of this, of course, is kind of verification and trust, I think, which is essentially with this, anyone could create a WARC file and render it and say that, this appeared on Twitter at this particular date. And so I think that, that becomes even more important to have that. And I don't know if Twitter were to support sign exchanges, for example, I don't know if they would, or if there is some way to do it client side to have that kind of verification. I think it'll become increasingly more important as
So we were more stuck on the the possibility of trying to extend the trust of those signed exchanges. Signed exchanges are fine; they will work for a few hours, few days, but we are talking about not decades but centuries to come. How long are they going to last, and the trust will remain like, yeah, this page indeed came. So we discussed some ideas around that to keep that boundary extending, and while the technology evolves, the signature infrastructure changes and things come and go. How can we make it last longer? That was something that we did discuss some ideas around that. And I will hopefully be creating some tickets in the repo to kind of echo back all the stuff that we discussed there. That'll be really cool. And I really see some great potential of web archiving if and when it makes sense.
Okay, great.
So I guess time's up. It's just a really short show and tell. Thanks for showing us the wabac.js and Wayback, the service. And I think this is going to be really cool to get it working as in partnership with IPFS. And thanks, Ilya.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me.